Hi there and a big welcome to an Esika God of the 3 deck tech video. You see, recently we had the Boil, which is currently the biggest cEDH tournament ever, with 324 players participating, and we have two Esika decks, one that got into 10th position and 13th position. And if we actually look at the breakdown, we can see that both, if I scroll down a tiny bit here, just above my head right there, we have two entries of Esika and both are getting into the top 16 position. Now, they're not winning the entire tournament. The winner was Jordan Drake with Thrasius and Tymna, but still, considering it was a really large tournament, it's a pretty impressive thing. Now, I calculate win rate from various commanders entering into various tournaments like the one you saw right there. And Esika, not including the Boil right now, have 39 tournament entries, so it's not a popular deck, but as you can see, it's performing quite good. And this is the update. Now, explain. This is the old Esika performance pre-ban when Dockside and Mana Crypt were illegal, and this is with post-ban when Dockside and Mana Crypt have been banned. So as you can see, Esika is still kinda doing good if in comparison we have Tymna and Crom with 305 entries so far post-ban have a win rate of 25.92. So there are some indications that Esika might be onto something good. But what are they up to? Well, let's take a look at their deck list and see if we can figure something out, or get a picture of it at the very least. So this, or both of them, are actually farm builds. If we actually scroll down, we can see Ad Nos, Cooling Ritual, Born Upon the Wind, Brain Freeze, Wheel of Fortune, Mnemonic Betrayal, The One Ring, Underworld Breach, Necropotence, Fastast Oracle, only 15 creatures. Valley Floodcaller being one of them for the Necropotence combo, together with a Final Fortune. So this looks very similar to the Tymna Crom blue farm that we're quite used to, except that we're adding green mana, which allows for green cards like Elvish Spirit Guide, Bird of Paradise, Tinder Wall, Cooling Ritual, Crop Rotation, Eldermir's Call, and a commander that will tap for mana and make all your legendary, not that many legendaries, tapping for mana as well. The amount of legendaries we have here are Lofo, Ragavan, and that's it. Some might say or speculate that the plan is to potentially use the bridge, and one thing you could do is like Vamp Tutor, put like Fastest Oracle or Grand Abolisher on top of your deck, and then use the bridge to flip into that. But I've talked to the guys and it's like 1% of the games that you actually cast the bridge when nothing is going according to plan. If we actually take a look at Dave Petal, the other person, his deck is basically identical, card by card, literally identical. And as you can see, they know each other. They actually built and played this together. I talked to them and yeah. And if I'm going to be honest, Ad Nauseam is a pretty good strategy still. Like, sure, you did lose Dockside and sure, you did lose Mana Crypt, but the format is honestly still quite fast. For example, Necropotence have been gaining an upgrade in the version of Valley Floodcaller. And having a 5 Call Identity commander for only 3 mana gives you access to Deflecting Swat and Fierce Guardianship. So this is not a commander focused deck, but it's a commander deck that gains a tiny bit of a boost when the commander comes into play. But as you can see here among artifacts, we don't play Mox Amber, which means that the goal is not always to get Esika into play, it is just a boost for the deck in general. Now, of course, you can tweak this build quite a lot and change it into including more potential legendaries, like Tymna. Just imagine it. 3 mana, you gain a mana rock and something that can attack, and whenever you connect to people's face, you draw cards just like mana and card at the same time. Perfect mid-range card in general. Honestly though, Tymna is actually not that good as a lot of people might think. Some of you know that I have been starting to calculate data on individual games, actually observing and looking at those games, and even counting the amount of cards Tymna's draws in every single game. And from 13 games so far, the average draw rate on how many cards Tymna drew that game are down to 2.07, which is not that good. A big reason for this weakness is because cEDH games in general are quite low on the turn number. Like games reach to like turn 3, turn 4, and from that point, turn 5 and 6 happens, but it's a rarity. And because of the low amount of turns, you don't have that many available combat steps for you. Now I once again know that the sample size is not that big, but it's an indication, and in my personal experience, I think that this is going to stay once we reach like 100 games. So I think you want to stay away from potentially including too many cards, as they might become a potential trap. But also, as you are on AdNOS, it could be good to just keep the CMC low. For example, I have mentioned that I think Talion is a pretty good card for the 99 in general, something I would potentially recommend, and I could definitely see a world where Esika might include this thing, being that it's something of a heuristic study, but also a legendary. I mean, this is gonna be able to tap for mana with Esika, so that's a cool synergy. But the CMC is 4, and that's gonna hurt the potential of AdNOS here. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't or should play Talion, just have it in consideration that it might not work out. And sometimes it might be really good. And this is kind of the strength of Esika, being a 5-color deck that can synergize with various different commanders, so depending on the metagame and how things develop, Talion might be something to consider for a potential future if you feel that you need more value engines. There's also this Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, which is just 1 black mana, which means it's gonna be something like a Bird of Paradise for this Esika build, because it gains vigilance so it can attack, connect, do its cool connect thing, but also tap for mana afterwards. And this is not a good card, but if you're in a metagame where your opponents are sacrificing their Lotus Petals, and sometimes trying to combo off and win with Underworld Breach, and sometimes an Underworld Breach ends up in a graveyard, then this could be a pretty good thing. Also, it's just 1 black mana, so it will function okay with that ad nauseum. Once again, I'm not telling you to actually play this, because honestly, it's not like a Ragavan. Ragavan is better than this, but it's something to have in your consideration. I think that when you're building this deck, you should have a maybe board, or something you could call a sideboard, so that you can tweak it depending on how you feel of what you might need. We should obviously also mention Kenan, which is going to be like a double Esika effect. So if you have Kenan and Esika in play, that's 4 mana total from just both of those two, and every single legendary afterwards is going to increase it as well. But also, Kenan's mana production is actually quite good, especially considering that you have a lot of artifacts and some mana dorks inside this build. So yeah, there is definitely a potential synergy throughout the build. Like, you don't need to have Esika in play for Kenan to be decent, but once you have Esika and Kenan in play, boom. Now you're not gonna activate Kenan. You can. You have like a few creatures, but the core focus is still ad nauseum here. But still, the CMC of only 2 means that it's gonna function pretty okay with AdNOS. However, this actually brings up a very important subject that I talked about with the creators of this build, that there is an actual limit of how much mana you can actually use, or how much you need. You're not having Thrasius as your commander, and I don't think you should have Thrasius inside this build either, but Thrasius as a commander, there's no problem in having too much excess mana. More mana means more Thrasius activations. It's like, oh, I accidentally had 5 more mana from out of nowhere. Well, I guess Thrasius will activate. It's not useless mana. But in Esika as the commander, that's not the deal. Like, if you have infinite mana, you don't win. So sitting there with like Esika, Kenan, and some other legendaries and producing a lot of mana means that, yeah, you're gonna empty your hand, but then you're gonna need some card draw. So it might just be better to focus down on the core concept of trying to tutor for AdNOS and trying to figure out a good victory path with your Grixis combos that usually results in a Thassa's Oracle ETB effect. Just like how everyone else wins. But it works. But there's one more concept that I think is quite important to highlight when you're choosing to actually play Esika, and that's what's written there in highlight. So that's exactly what I want. The amount of times people have asked me if I'm doing a polymorph game plan was hilarious. When someone sees Tymna and Crom as an opponent, they're gonna evaluate that this is gonna be a very strong enemy and something to respect. I mean, they kinda are something of the boogeyman of the format, or one of the boogeymans, you could say. But when someone is bringing Esika, I mean, just look at that. Total decks 5 so far, and here you have 305, which means that people, your opponents, are gonna have a higher experience playing against Tymna Crom, and they kinda know what's up. And when you're sitting down with Esika, you can just shrug and say, I'm a legendary mid-range tribal, or something of the sort. And you can get away with things. You can fly under the radar, and that's actually been proving to be working out as a favor for people. Being a viewed underdog in a tournament is in the end a good thing. Like, look at this. If we're actually jumping back to the boil, here we have in the top 4th position Magda. And Magda is also considered something of like an underdog, or a commander that people don't true, or it kind of changed. Magda has actually been gaining a few popularity votes and people have been playing it, but there still are a few people around that actually don't understand how that deck operates. Like, look here, we have 23 entries of Tymna and Thrasius, we have 23 of Roxai and 11 of Magda, and then we have 32 of Crom and Tymna, and then we have 23 on Kenan. So yeah, there's a big difference on how many games certain commanders get, and once again, this will lead to your opponents having less experience against commanders like Magda, Esika especially, and even Cise in this case. I hope you enjoyed this Esika deck tech video. Link in the description below of this video for both deck lists, as currently they are identical, but who knows, they might diverge away from each other. I don't think they're gonna do that though. But also in the description below of this video, I will leave a link to an Esika Discord if you actually wanna take a look and talk with other Esika enthusiasts, because we need more of those. Esika is not currently popular, and I think that should change. I mean, everyone doesn't have to play Roxai, right?